That's actually housewares china. This is the old Watson's department store that actually makes up the chamber building here on the top, and retail and restaurants on the bottom. 7 old buildings across through here. And when my wife came in and saw this building, she said, my office is just behind this wall. That's where China was, and this was houseware, so welcome to China. But thank you for being here. We're so happy to have you. What a great turnout. The Active Knox Speaker Series featuring Jeff Randolf today. I know you guys are going to enjoy it. This event is sponsored by Active Knox, which is a diverse group of partners that includes AARP, Bike Walk Knoxville, the Knoxville Chamber, the Knoxville Track Club, Legacy Parks Foundation, the Knoxville Area Association of Realtors, East Tennessee Quality Growth, Knox County Schools, the University of Tennessee, community partners, the Metropolitan Planning Commission, and the Knoxville Regional TPO. And then funding for the speaker series is provided by the Tennessee Department of Health. So let's give all of them a round of applause. Well, as you guys know, Active Knox is a group committed to bringing innovative and proven ideas that can help make Knoxville and Knox County a more active and more engaging and a more economically diverse and vibrant place to live and to work and to play. So thank you again for being committed to being here with us today and being a part of that. What I'd like to do now is bring up City Councilman Marshall Stair to introduce our speaker. Marshall. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for everybody coming out today. We really want to thank the Chamber for hosting us. This is a perfect room here in Watson's to host this event. I'd also like to thank, and I've got the list here, the elected officials in the House. We've got former Mayor and Council Member Dan Brown right here sitting down. County Commissioner Evelyn Gill, thank you for joining us. Ron Pincock from Farragut, thank you for attending, and also from Farragut, Luis Pavlo, and another one of my colleagues, Finbar Saunders, and then 2 of my future colleagues in a couple of weeks, Simasine Perez, raise your hand, and Stephanie Welch. Thank you all for coming out, getting on the job early. Mark mentioned these sponsors, but it's actually highlighted on my sheet, so I want to mention them one more time. It's Active Knox is a partnership of AARP, Bike Walk Knoxville, the Knoxville Chamber, the Knoxville Track Club, Legacy Parks Foundation, the Knoxville Area Association of Realtors, East Tennessee Quality Growth, Knox County Schools, University of Tennessee, community partners, the Metropolitan Planning Commission, and the Knoxville Regional TPO. And funding for this series is provided by the Tennessee Department of Health. So let's all give them a round of applause. That's certainly a big group. I don't know if there's any groups not included in this coalition. So that's always a good thing when you're talking about trying to improve your community. It's my privilege to introduce our speaker today, Jeff Randolf. He's the president of Randolf Group. His company specializes in residential, urban infill, and mixed-use communities. And they were recognized by Southern Living magazine in 2010 for their work in the Viola neighborhood in Greenville, South Carolina. It was deemed one of the best 10 comeback neighborhoods in the country. In addition to being a developer, is also instructor at Clemson University and has a master in real estate development in the master in real estate development program. And I think this message is really important because we talk a lot about walkability, and a lot of times when you talk to people about it, the first thing they think about is sidewalks, which are extremely important. That's a big part about making a community walkable. But land use is, I think, really just as important, and maybe more important. It's about creating environments where people feel safe and comfortable and want to walk. And this is how we can get the community more active walking. So to do that, it's going to require creative developers, people in this room, people not in this room, to help build some of these communities. So I think this is so relevant to hopefully I think we're going to see some of these different types creative developments that are more walkable and where we're going. So with that, let's give a warm welcome to our speaker, Jeff Randolf.
Thank you very much, Councilman Stair, for that gracious introduction. I'd also like to thank Active Knox and Metropolitan Planning Commission and its staff for the invitation. When Ellen called me back in August, I was actually on the beach in Florida, but I didn't have anything else to do, so I took the phone call. She talked about the possibility of this engagement. I wondered how low on the list she had to get to my name. I wondered, there's numerous developers, a lot way better than me, who she could have contacted to speak on this topic of mixed-use development. I'm grateful to those other developers who declined her invitation. My wife kind of manages getting me from place to place, and she said, "So what's coming up?" I told her about this. She said, "You're going to be talking to how many people? Like 4 groups?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, for gosh sakes, Jeff, could you go get your shoes cleaned?" I am an abuser of car because I develop across the Southeast. I just trash my car. I get in it on Monday. I eat. I throw it in the back seat. I mean, there's probably all kind of stuff growing in there. And then I'm terrible with my shoes. So I was an adult this past week, and I took my shoes to the local shoe shop guy who I know. Gave him my shoes. I got up yesterday morning. That was Thursday. I got up yesterday morning. I went down there, and it was locked. I could see my shoes right there, right where the mayor is sitting. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So on my way up here, you'll notice I have some really great looking shoes. I don't normally look this hip, but might as well. Let me frame the conversation today. The Facebook invitation and flyer stated that the purpose of this presentation was to learn how the public can support the creation of successful mixed-use developments at all scales and price points. And actually what we need to do is to step back a few feet and open a dialogue regarding what do we mean by the term mixed-use development, who are the participants in this dialogue, and what are the tensions, what are the natural tensions that exist in this dialogue, and discuss the benefits and the difficulties related to mixed-use development. We're going to discuss some of the critical components from my viewpoint of a successful mixed-use development. And I propose that if these components are implemented properly, each of the participants in this dialogue, including the public, can recognize the benefits and support mixed-use development. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and the Randolf Group, just to give you some context. I've been in the development business for 35 years, and specifically in the residential development for 30 years. We are primarily residential land developers. Most of what we do is horizontal infrastructure and partner with builders and developers regarding vertical construction. Most of my peers are single market developers, meaning they develop in Greenville, they develop in Charleston, they develop in Knoxville. My experience first starting with Liberty Life Insurance Company in 1984, and then as Randolf Group in 1997, is developing in multiple markets from Tampa, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Nashville, Tennessee, and across the Carolinas. We are not afraid to venture into someone else's market. It's fun to play in your backyard, but it's real fun to play in somebody else's backyard. This out-of-market experience has served us, has allowed us to, one, see and experience best practices, to learn how to be adaptive and embrace the ambiguity in each marketplace, and actually just to survive. If it had not been for our active developments in multiple markets in the recession, we would not have survived. I did not sell one lot in Greenville for 3 years during the recession. Many of my peers did not survive, which is why the business has consolidated, and many residential developments are now being self-developed by builders for their own product. I do not see this as a positive for the promotion of mixed-use communities. A builder thinks first about structure, a developer should think first about building a sense of community. In many markets today, a builder finds a developer, brings him the deal, brings him the land plan, tells him what the name, the concept, and the price point of the development should be. That is not a developer, that's a road builder. Our company is located in Greenville. I'm sure some of you have been to our city. We're experiencing significant growth and receiving a lot of publicity. A lot of that just has to do, we've got a great marketing arm for the city, and they just they wear that Facebook thing out. Greenville is a great city with significant attributes. You might be thinking that the concept that we're going to talk about today, mixed-use development, is more adaptable in Greenville because of that experience, because it might be significantly different than Knoxville. However, I would argue that there are more similarities between Greenville and Knoxville than differences. You take a look at some of these statistics. It's almost uncanny, the similarities: population, household income, and number of employees almost the same. I mean, almost virtually the same. Knoxville has a slightly older population, which which you should find beneficial for the type of developments we're going to discuss today. 8% higher property values in Knoxville. My point is that Knoxville is a good market. It's a growing market. It is attracting new residents, and it's retaining native residents. These residents include millennials, families, and empty nesters. And these population segments are looking for and choosing both urban and near urban neighborhoods that offer a sense of community. In other words, they are choosing mixed-use developments. The consumer in Knoxville is not unique. So what do we mean by mixed-use development? As defined by multiple planning and development organizations, a mixed-use development means it's a building or a group of buildings or structures that includes different land uses, a mixture of land uses. Typically, the term is used when residential uses are combined with office, retail, childcare, civic uses such as schools, libraries, churches, governmental services such as a fire station. There's an emphasis on the pedestrian rather than the automobile. There's a value placed on a sense of community rather than just value placed on a structure. And there's value to placemaking, and not just on the place you work, play, or live. It can be confusing and misunderstood. Mixed use could be limited to a single building or a multi-story development in an urban setting that incorporates commercial and retail uses on the first floor with residential or office uses on the upper floor. It could also apply to a larger site, both near urban and suburban. They could incorporate different land uses to be built next to each other or near each other within a given neighborhood. I would venture to say that that's where your area might be struggling. Mixed use typically can be characterized in three forms. You could have a vertical mixed-use development, which combines different uses within the same building. So you have retail on the first, residential on the second. Typically, first floor would have more public spaces, restaurants, banks, retails. Upper floor would be more private, apartments, condos, hotels, offices. These type of buildings have been occurring for centuries. Think back to when you had the local pharmacy, local drugstore on the first floor, and the pharmacist lived upstairs. It's no different. This type of single mixed-use development is more urban and typically in the correct location. I would venture to say it probably has less opposition. A second application would be horizontal mixed-use blocks. So this would be combining single-use buildings on individual parcels within a single block or a few blocks. They can be found in urban or less urban areas. This allows for the specialization of the developer, which is one of the difficulties in mixed use because I'm primarily a residential guy. The guy down the street is a retail guy. He's got his banking relationships. I've got my banking relationships. My bank doesn't want to invest in retail. That's not in their portfolio. The apartment guy doesn't want to do condos. The retail guy doesn't want to do condos. So by having a mixed use block, it allows the developer to specialize. It allows for sharing of infrastructure like parking and utilities. It's typically supported as long as the location is compatible to historical patterns. So if you've got a neighborhood that has some apartments in it, probably do a mixed-use neighborhood of apartments. Where the developer introduces a significant density increase or a use that is out of the norms of the community, that's where you'll see opposition. The third application, which is kind of where we spend most of our time in, is mixed-use walkable communities. This is the foundation of our company. It can combine both vertical and horizontal elements over a large parcel. Usually it's clustered around a core element or of an amenity, usually within a 10-minute walk. It offers multiple housing options. Walkability is a key. Unlike a traditional community, which my guess is just riding around Knoxville, Knox County, traditional communities offer one size lot and one housing style or option. A mixed-use community could have multiple housing products and lot sizes and price ranges on the same street. These type of communities are attractive to the consumer, but of concern to the existing residents due to price point fears, traffic, and simply just the unknown. So now with a definition of mixed use, what are the key components? I would suggest that these are some of the key components. A right location is not, keep this in mind, not every location can support mixed use. Just because you have a 100-acre piece of property out in the suburbs doesn't mean you should do mixed use. The location must be in a promising location, poised for growth, particularly housing growth. You would want to be looking for rising job growth, low unemployment, new housing construction, public infrastructure that's going to be in place, and popular businesses moving to the area. The location should be attractive to millennials. They are 35% of your buyers. They are struggling to get into the home ownership world. But with mixed-use housing, mixed housing options, that's attractive to them. It's also attractive to empty nester home buyers who make up 19%, so that's 35-19, that's 49% of your market there. Those empty nesters are downsizing, and they're looking for amenities and an experience oftentimes found in a mixed-use community. And finally, a successful mixed-use development, it's essential for commercial uses of various sizes and types. Foot traffic is important in an urban and near-urban location, and in a suburban location, support from adjoining residents and the availability of easy access and parking is critical. Secondly, an effective and creative land plan. A great land plan can maximize a mediocre property. I have developed on some pretty plain looking pieces of property. I mean, pastures, you know. But with a great land plan, you can take a piece of property and make it great. A fundamental component is the visual appeal and layout of a mixed-use development is critically important to its prosperity. You need to emphasize the character of the property as well as the characteristics of the property. You have to land plan with your eyes and not with your pencil. The development community should be going to the engineers and the land planners and saying, here's what I need. All right. If you just hand it to the land planner, he comes back, it's just what he wants. All right. May not understand the market. You have to take into account vistas offered by the property. What can you see from the property, and what can you see as you enter the property? What are the natural features? An effective land plan can introduce infrastructure cost, improve infrastructure efficiency, and increase density. This land plan here is a project, part of a 800-acre mixed-use community we have in Charleston area. It's a small piece of property, not a great little piece of property. It's got a thing you're not sure what to do with it. The first land plan, we went to our land planner. He came back, and lo and behold, he had a cul-de-sac right up here and had about 12 units around it. We went back and did some more land planning, and we were able to get unit count on the same piece of property at 25. We were able to introduce a new product, a townhome product, rather than a single-family detached product. And we have less infrastructure. This infrastructure is all private infrastructure, going maintained by the HOA so that the local county does not have to maintain it. So you need to control and guide what the land planner is going to do. Another small deal in Simpsonville near Greenville, We had a cul-de-sac here. Notice the square cul-de-sacs down here in the bottom and the use of these corner pieces. Triangles usually, houses that are squares and rectangles don't fit on triangle lots, right? So, and this was, instead of having a triangle lot over here in the corner, you can notice the tight angles on the roads. And so again, just trying to utilize what piece of property is there. I would say another important aspect is dynamic streetscape. They need to be aesthetically pleasing. Streetscapes are your sidewalk jewelry. They add value to the shopper as they walk down the sidewalk between stores. Streetscapes add glamour to the residential community. They benefit the walker as they interact with neighbors. They enhance the visual experience of the driver entering the community who might be a visitor to the community first time or a resident coming back. Here's a warning: land use restrictions that are in place do a lot to eliminate sidewalk jewelry and glamour from developments due to setback requirements, road requirements, parking requirements, height limitations. This is a neighborhood that we have, and the original land plan had a road in front of these. This is a big central park. That's a characteristic of an awful lot of our developments. There's an alley behind it here, so these homeowners get their access from that alley. They have a detached garage. So if the house was going to burn down, the firemen could drive down that alley. Okay, where it keep you out of here. We had a road in front. We went to the city of Greer and said, do we really need this road? Because if I'm a parent and I live in one of these townhomes, I'd much rather my child run out the front door into a park rather than out the front door into a road and into the park, right? By eliminating this road, that is 250 feet at $300 a foot. Do the math. It's expensive. We're able to lower, make these houses more affordable, and the government doesn't have to take care of this road. That road doesn't generate storm drainage, less storm drainage. Some other streetscapes. This is not what you want, all right? It's a great picture. It wasn't from your family. It's in Greensboro, actually. So I'm sure you don't have anything that ugly. All right. Amenities. You need both active and passive amenities. To today's consumers, millennials to families and empty nesters are enticed by the placement and availability of amenities. According to one mixed-use developer, everyone really wants that walkable, amenity-rich environment where there's a feeling of community. Amenities can be active and passive, and I would also say that the definition of amenities can be broadened to include retail and commercial in a walkable neighborhood. Obviously, in a residential community, you think about amenities, you're thinking about pool, clubhouse, tennis court. I would suggest that you can include parks, walking trails, sidewalks on both sides of the street, dog parks, community gardens. Most of these are passive amenities, can be implemented at a fraction of the cost of a traditional active amenity, both the upfront cost, the capital cost, and the long-term cost. This is the dog park. It's just amazing how many people use this dog park. You know, I get more use out of this $20,000 dog park than a $150,000 pool. Had some homeowners say that outside dogs are using it, and they wanted to come up with a key fob system for the dog. And I'm like, I'll take that into advisement. A fireplace in the middle of a park. I saw this little building in Oxford, Mississippi. It has a store underneath it and one little residential unit on top of it. All right. A church in your neighborhood can be a great amenity with its ministries to children and to parents. You think of the added value to a parent. If you have a daycare or preschool in your neighborhood and that parent or grandparent can walk down the street to get the child, you think about the chance to go to a yoga class that's down the street, or placement of a church in the community with its ministries to children and parents. So, Another key component is community details. The standard premise in a residential development from a builder's perspective and a resident's perspective is that all of their value is in the house. So you buy a house, you pay X dollars, all your value is in that house. It's all calculated in the vertical construction. An alternative argument from the developer's perspective should be that community features should be a value added. The argument should be that if a builder constructs two identical houses, two locations, and I would venture to say in Knoxville, if he builds those two houses in Knoxville, the buyers are going to look at both houses. It's not that big of a market, definitely in the Greenville area. But your argument is that if he builds two houses identical, that the home of the development with the best community features such as lifestyle, land plan, amenities, and streetscape should sell quicker and for more price per square foot. Therefore, builders' margins and profits should be higher and their risk should be lower. Community features, such as one we'll talk about, should be part of the development process and branding. The attentions to these details should add value to the builder, to the developer, and then to the end user, the public. So what are some of these details? Attention to corner lots, just how you orient your streets and your parks and your houses to the corner lot. You can see this house, it's got a corner porch here. Builder came to us, said they want to build on that lot. We said you got to have a porch on that side. Builder says, well, I don't want to do that. I'm like, well, just and go down to another lot. But this is a key lot. It's a critical lot. Orientation to the street, how you angle houses to the street. You don't want this. Obviously, this person, once again in Greensboro, wanted to be on the corner lot. The reason you want to buy on the corner lot because they think they have more privacy, but what do? They put up a big fence. It's just ugly. Or coming up to the back of a house, this is coming down to the corner. This is the back view. You just have to pay attention to details. Garages. A garage should not be the main architectural feature of your house. All right. Most of them are pretty plain Jane, but you can dress them up with windows, fake hardware. That window there costs $125. That fake hardware costs about $50. But it looks like two doors, and then a pediment above the door helps break up that plane. You don't want this. Pretty ugly. I'm picking on Greensboro. Anybody here from Greensboro? I was just there last week making a presentation for the family, so I kind of have to show them some of this. Fences and gates, or the lack of a gate. You may not put a gate here, but obviously you've got a feature facing, looking straight into that house. Right? Artwork and engaging features in the neighborhood. Chalkboard, gotta be careful where you put the chalkboards. People will tend to put stuff on them. You can wrap anything. Now I wouldn't go ask Duke Power for permission to wrap it. You just wrap it and they probably won't say anything to you, but you can wrap it. You can also paint it. So just interesting features that you can do. All right. We talked about housing options. I would suggest this is to benefit affordability. Typical zoning codes, and I know your code here is fairly old, have forced the lack of diversity of product available in post-1960 developments. Realtor and consumer sentiments have been drawn to a single product development with tightly priced bands. So a developer goes out, he finds 25 to 50 acres. He's going to build one product, one price point. It's going to be 200 to 250, 250 to 300, or 150 to 200. Most of the houses are going to look the same. Diversity is overshadowed by architectural compatibility of the product. If you think to some of your more successful neighborhoods now, the ones that people want to live in, you will think about. They live and they've got a house in the neighborhood that's over $1 million, and they've got another duplex in the neighborhood that's $150,000. It all works perfectly fine. What happened in the 70s and 90s is to add that diversity, put in big spine roads, and then had a 150 to 200 product over here, 250 to 300 over here. A lot of infrastructure costs. You're not really helping yourself there. What I would suggest is that you need to offer multiple housing products. This is a neighborhood that we have in Greenville. So Again, here's those townhomes. Within walking distance, it's not a duplex, it's a twin home. That's what I was told by my attorney. This is another street, and right here on this street, we have townhome, twin home, and a single-family detached house, right? If you're trying to figure out what is the most expensive house per square foot, it's the townhome. The townhome was $120 a foot, that was $110 a foot, all right?
Why is that?
I mean, some of it's just the buyer that's going into it. This buyer is willing to pay more for this park. It's not necessarily a cheaper product to build either. We just knew that we thought that, this house here has one kitchen. This house here has one kitchen. So you got the same prices. So typically, this one is actually cheaper to build. He's got one kitchen, he's got 3 baths, and square footage, this house is the largest. This is a 1,200 to 1,500 square foot townhome. This is probably a 2,200 square foot house. This has 2 bedrooms. Actually, the one here has a 3-bedroom. This is 3 bedrooms. It just means he's got bigger bedrooms, okay? Which costs more money to build. The actual pure dollars cost more money. So. This is a neighborhood that we have in Greer, and this is my point, is that a neighborhood should have price ranges that should be broad in O'Neill Village. We have a townhome here with no garage that's selling for about $175,000 to a townhome with a detached garage that's selling for a little under $200,000 to a duplex or a twin home that's here to a single family detached house with a detached garage to one with an attached garage to an estate house. The range in the size lot goes from a 20-foot townhome lot up to a 100-foot estate lot. We have a price point that goes from 110 to actually I was thinking the price per square foot. That's really $170,000 to $350,000, and square footage from 1,200 to 3,200. We're having no issues getting comparables in this area. And there's your comparables in this area. And there's your visual. And the last component I would discuss is just the right business mix. You need commercial. There are foundational commercial tenants and businesses which add value to the mixed-use development, whether it's a single building in an urban block. These tenants increase foot traffic. I would propose to you that local tenants should be emphasized. Local tenants know your community. The national brands will show up. I mean, the retailers, they all go out to the conferences. He says he wants to be in Knoxville, they'll show up. You got to get the local tenant in the mix somehow, particularly in a walkable community. All right. Just a few more pictures. Well, I've done something. I think somebody's going to go back. Let me offer you 7 benefits of mixed-use developments. One is economic. It's a clear connection between a walkable environment and the economic vitality of the city. It can help revitalize the downtown. It can increase household wealth by shifting spending away from transportation and into real estate. Let me catch back up. Secondly is minimize infrastructure costs. Traditional zoning of the past promotes large lots developments. They require costly and redundant infrastructure. Increased tax revenue. Mixed-use developments show you're going to increase density. Density increases tax revenues per acre. You can increase your tax revenue by 10%. Reduction in maintenance costs. You're building less roads. You got less to maintain. Environmental. You're going to lose about 45% less land. Health improvements. Research indicates that over 50% of the consumers would rather walk and drive if given the choice. All right. And finally, it creates strong emotional and social aspects for the consumer. 1 out of 3 persons desire to live in a walkable community. Now let me define for you who are the people in this dialogue. I would say that there are 3 people that are included in this dialogue. First is the developer. I had a boss a long time ago. I was working at JCPenney. He said the goal is you got to make money and friends. I would suggest the same applies to a developer. You got to make money and you got to make friends. Certainly we can understand the goal of making money. The developer may have investors. He probably has bank debt, which means guarantees, which means there's an awful lot of personal wealth that is at risk. The goal of making friends is really twofold. First, the developer has to create a product that will attract the consumer. You build a house, build something, they don't rent it, they don't buy it, then you haven't accomplished it. The product has to sell. But secondly, the developer should create a product that does more than just sell. It needs to add value to the community, improve the landscape, and exceed the expectations of the marketplace. If your goal is just to meet the minimum thresholds of the market, that cannot be your expectation. The second participant in this dialogue is the public sector, many of you that might be in this room. The goals of these participants should be to lead and direct the efforts towards sustainability and quality development, as well as to maximize the resources of your cities. Public sector participants include certainly council members, planning commission members, and staff. When you think of the staff, mixed-use development, your mind immediately goes to the planning staff, and obviously they have a big role. But unfortunately, the efforts of the planning commission and the staff can be undermined by those whose role it is to implement and interpret the rules and the codes. I can provide you with countless examples of developments that have been approved by the planning commission, approved by council, only to be derailed by the engineering staff who demand excessive site triangles at roadway intersections, building code officials who interpret separation between building from lot lines rather than building walls, and fire marshals who require wider streets for fear of a street being blocked. I was in a conversation recently with a building code official in a neighborhood that had been approved by the planning commission and by the city, and it included 0 lot line housing, which meant that I could build the house on the lot where the roof couldn't go over that lot line, knowing that I would have to have separation between the houses for fire code, which is typically 10 feet. The code official interpreted that I had to be 5 feet off the property line. To get my 10 foot, it had to be 5 and 5. Even on a lot that I had common area that was going for about a mile that way, I had to be 5 feet off that lot. And then ended up doing it. I looked her in the eye and I said, well, you have just erased from the language and the vocabulary of the world 0 lot line. Congratulations. And if I had had a Webster dictionary, I would have just ripped it out right there. I've had a fire marshal on a one-way street say that I had to put signs up when there's a pool here. His fire station is next door to the pool. But to get there, he would have to come out, go down and around, have to come to a one-way street. He didn't want a one-way street. He wanted a two-way street because he was afraid he was not going to be able to fight the fire at the pool. I don't know that there's a lot of people that were going to burn up in the pool, okay? But he wouldn't even do it. He just run across the grass to get there. So he made me put up signs that said no parking on the street. The third participant in this dialogue is the public, the general public. And the goals of the public are simple. It's to live in a vibrant community with job opportunities, affordable housing, an amenity-rich environment, and a sense of place. However, I would suggest that this participant is the hardest to understand and oftentimes has competing goals. The public has inner demons with regards to development in general and mixed-use, mixed-product development specifically, which makes your jobs harder. A few signs of these internal struggles and disease of the public, I would suggest they have an obesity issue. Big and ugly is better than small and cute. As long as the house down the street is bigger, We don't care what it looks like, but that house will be worth more money. All right? We have an anxiety over personal space. We complain about flooding and stormwater runoff, but we want our streets to be wide just in case someone parks their car on the street, because something bad's going to happen when the car is parked on the street. We fear smaller lots because bad things happen in bad places. Third, inner demon, we have a taste disorder. My grandmother said that some people's taste is all in their mouth. We don't like retail centers with sea of asphalt and parking lots. Think about Target. How many spaces are out there? Think about CVS. How many spaces are in a typical CVS? Got 50 to 60 spaces. You ever felt crowded in a CVS? Not really. However, we're the first to complain about these ugly parking lots, but we don't want to walk 5 or 10 minutes to get there. All right, we want to park right outside the door. So we have a taste disorder. I would say we have a diversity anxiety. We want everything around us to look and feel just like us. We don't want renters in our midst. We certainly would not want someone in a neighborhood renting a house. We don't want a small house or a townhome down the street. And we certainly can't have retail stores such as a dry cleaner or a children's boutique in our community, because of outside traffic. So those three participants have competing goals. They have tensions. They're natural tensions. And the solution, I would suggest, to achieve mixed-use development would be a better dialogue, leadership, a little less anxiety, and a respect for the needs and the goals of others in the dialogue. The public needs to understand that all developers are not evil. Making money is not inherently wrong, and that there are developers who are trying to make friends. Developers need to make some friends and contribute to placemaking. Developers need to listen to the public, they need to listen to the consumer, and they need to listen to the public sector. And then the public just needs to embrace ambiguity. Public sector needs to embrace ambiguity and live sometimes in the gray rather than just living in the black and white. I appreciate your time and consideration of what we've talked about. Any questions? Is questions appropriate?
Yeah, we have time.
Anybody have any questions?
Yes. On your zoning definitions, are you doing a plan unit development overlay for some of these zones, districts in these communities, or how are you administering that?
Typically, it's done in a planned unit development, although in South Carolina, residential PDs outlawed. So now they've created some other name, but it's still a PD. So typically, I would do PDs. It gives me more flexibility. I have no problem. Usually, the developer will say they don't like PDs because public sector and the public get to weigh in on everything. I don't have an issue with that because I believe that I'm going to exceed the expectations of the public. But yes, that's typically how it's done. I would also annex, anytime I have a chance to annex into a municipality, I do. I'd rather work in a municipality than in a county. It's just more difficult in the county. The county has just broader goals. It's a little bit more complicated. So I would typically annex. It does increase my taxes, but I think it gives me more flexibility.
Also, as a follow-up, the neighborhood covenants looks like they would be a little bit more diverse. Do you have model covenants that you utilize?
I do. Our typical covenants, your traditional covenants, like for a residential neighborhood, might say minimum square footage of X. We typically don't put minimums in there because somebody can come in and build 1,000 square foot house and spend $200 a foot. So it's really about price that you want to, and what it looks like. We would typically have sub-associations for the retail or the commercial. You don't want a commercial tenant, a member of your pool, or a member of some of those things, so we separate those. But they're not that complicated, but my covenants are typically a little bit more open-ended because I want to make sure, one, I'm going to be in complete control. I don't pass off any control to the association until we want to give it to them. I think as homeowner associations are kind of like your children. I got three. I got one that I'm kind of always behind pushing, and then I got another one that I'm having to hold back But I try to give authority to those homeowner associations as they take it. But architecturally, we keep architectural control to the very last house is built. I don't believe in what's called the game plan theory, because what will happen is a homeowner will get into the neighborhood, he builds X, and then he wants everything else to be bigger. So he pulls up the game plan and then doesn't let anybody else back in. So, yep, other questions? Yes, sir.
From the pictures that we saw, it looked and appeared as though everything around the area was extremely flat. Are there any additional factors to take into consideration in an area such as ours that is slightly more hilly and sloping?
Well, some of the neighborhoods that we have in Greenville would be more, it would have 8 to 10% slopes. I didn't have one of those. A couple pictures in there, but obviously you should have more slopes and more topography than we do, my guess. I think that gets back to the land plan. Don't force it. If you buy into the Kool-Aid of new urbanism, everything's got to have an alley and all this stuff. But sometimes it just doesn't work. You can't put a grid system in some places. I think you have to look at the piece of property, figure out what your product is, and then try to apply it to that. So if you can put in some areas that would accommodate a townhome, great. If it's rear loaded, if it's front loaded, you are going to have here, I imagine a significant amount of houses might have basements. So you're going to have to take that into account. I probably have about 15% of my product has a basement. Greenville's not wild about basements, but most of that is builders and realtors. That's not really consumers. The builders just don't know how to build them. Trying to put them in a box. Yes.
I was going to ask you about density, how important density is in providing some of those amenities. Right, I know here we a lot of times struggle with approving more than 3 units an acre on residential type tract. What scope do you use when you look at a project?
Let me see if I can find a neighborhood that unless we're in an urban area. So there was a couple of pictures in here of an inner city redevelopment project that we did in conjunction with the city. We got 17 units to the acre in one part of that, but I still have a large park in the middle of it. That development, Onia Village, it's 185 acres. It's only 3.4 units to acre, so I would say that that's fairly low, but it is clustered density. I have over, I think 50 acres of open space in that neighborhood. Now, I was telling, so you can see in this neighborhood, I've got a significant amount of open space. These are my more difficult slopes, and here the neighborhood goes all back here. I got open space scattered, but my density in here is really 3.5 units per acre. So I would say that's not very dense. No. So it's really where do you cluster the units? But I mentioned the difficulty of doing some of these things and then implementing it. So I'm in the city of Greer here. I have a zoning from the city of Greer. I get my water from a local water company who buys it from Greer and then resells it, marks it up. I got a problem with that. But that's another story. We went in there, they charge a water capacity fee to the developer. They just recently adopted a new scale. And on a lot of an acre or less, it's $1,000. On a lot of 7,000 square feet or less, it's $2,500. I'm like, why do you pay more for a smaller lot? And he said, well, it puts more stress and density. Well, if every single lot out here was 7,000 square feet and I didn't have open space, I can understand that. But when my density is 3.2, which is really about 15,000 square foot lots, I should be paying less. So you just have to go in there and argue, battle. I use the term battle. You got to battle. Yes,
I guess what I was trying to get at is the amenity package you have is really nice. And I guess what I was wanting to ask you is density or volume has to accompany a nice amenity package in order to be able to afford to provide that.
depends on what amenity. If it's going to be a pool, some of those, a park, you can spend, as much or as little. I would venture to say to the builder that if you're building one product in the neighborhood, everything is $250,000. You're probably going to sell no more in average, probably about 25 units a year, right? So by adding in some townhomes, by adding in some of these, by adding in some amenities, you're going to be able to get from 25 to 35 to 40, which then you spread your cost out. You're paying interest on those amenities. I would think that if you've got a small deal, you've got to weigh how much can you spend on amenities, and then what amenities do you spend it on. You probably don't need, a pool in every single neighborhood. And I would venture to say your consumers probably aren't really asking for that as much now. They would probably, if given the choice, if you said, here's $250,000, what would you spend it on? I bet you can have a pool and a pool house, or dog park, this, and this. They'll take the other.
How do you handle the parking in the commercial area? Is there parking available, or is this truly neighborhood commercial?
We have on-street parking on all these roads, and then we'll add more parking as we develop here. We'll add more parking too. We have a parking lot here, but that parking lot serves those townhomes during the day, and then at night, they serve the townhomes at night, and then the other uses during the day. There's another picture here with the neighborhood or community, an infill neighborhood we did in Greenville. I have a 35,000 square foot of mixed use space. About 15 of that is office space. Those office users are there during the day. They leave, and then the condo owners come and are at night. And you've also noticed that in a walkable community, I'm sure your standards, you've got X number of parking spaces per bedroom. We've been able to minimize those. Instead of one space per bedroom, we're probably at about 0.75 to a bedroom. So instead of 2 spaces for a 2-bedroom townhome, we were running at 1.5, which again reduces cost, reduces infrastructure, reduces maintenance, reduces stormwater. I'm sure that one of the biggest concerns you have is stormwater runoff. Well, what generates stormwater runoff is roads, a lot of it. So if you can eliminate roads, narrow up your roads, you're reducing stormwater cost. Yes, sir.
In the areas where you develop sidewalks mandated, or they develop?
Most of the areas that we're developing in, sidewalks are required on one side of the street. We require them on both sides of the street. We put in all the sidewalks that are on common areas. We typically do that on day one. And then the builder puts in the sidewalks after that. You don't really want
puts in the sidewalks
in front of the house, on any lot that he owns. So on a corner lot, he's got it on both sides. I had a conversation with the builder. He's like, I didn't know I had to put it on this side. I'm like, well, it's your lot. So yeah, and there's added value to being on a corner lot. I would not make your builders or make the developer put the infrastructure, that sidewalk in at the time of road construction, because it's just going to get broken up.
We've had a lot of talk about that here.
So what we would typically do is post a bond, letter of credit, cash for those sidewalks. Ultimately, the developer is still responsible, but you mandate, in my contracts, we mandate the builders put it in. And if they don't put it in, then you, the public sector, don't give the CO. And I guarantee you, if you hold the CO in front of the builder and you don't give it to him, he will put the sidewalk in, or he'll repair the crack in the sidewalk, or he'll repair the asphalt in the sidewalk. Right. Do I like the idea of having to post a bond for sidewalks? Not really, but make me post 2 bonds. Make one for roadway and drainage and another one for sidewalks. And then you can release me on everything else. You accept the roads and drainage, except for the sidewalks.
I think we've got time for one more discussion.
My question also was about sidewalks, and as Jeff mentioned, it's a hot topic here in Knoxville. But one of the things that we're looking at in Knoxville is doing sidewalks along community paths, pedestrian paths. Have you utilized pedestrian paths as opposed to sidewalks for mobility?
We have put in paths. They're usually not in the public right-of-way, so a path would then end up in the homeowner association. It's adding more cost, but there are plenty of opportunities to put in a path. Depends on what you make that path out of.
We apparently in a lot of developments, it's because of the slope and terrain, it is a challenge to do sidewalks, and that's kind of what we're looking at as far as alternatives.
Well, you can put that sidewalk right up. I mean, if you've got a slope issue, I'm assuming that the developers are having to grade the entire right-of-way. So your right-of-way should be graded. So now the issue really may be the sidewalk and then getting to the house. And that's probably your bigger issue, how they tie into that sidewalk. So paths, you just have to be concerned about what is that path going to be made of. You can use mulch. Mulch is difficult for people with strollers. Cost, just not the upfront cost, but the long-term cost. The great thing about a sidewalk, it goes in the public right-of-way, and then it's owned by the municipality. So, okay. Thank you very much.
Let's give Jeff a
I thought that was great. A lot of times this has been a series, and we really appreciate all the commissioners and planning people who've been out. A lot of times we hear from the head in the clouds planners, so it was great to hear from someone that's doing it. So thanks again. Jeff is speaking tonight is it Bearden High? Bearden High at 6. So if you want to hear him again, you can come out to that. But thanks again.